This episode is brought to you by our partnership with the Combine Dog. The Combine Dog, led by Nellie, a certified canine nutritionist and wellness advocate, is all about harmonizing dog and human lives. Through natural wellness, canine nutrition, and meaningful insights, it helps dog guardians build stronger bonds with their dogs while fostering healthy, enriched lifestyles for both. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, the podcast where pet parents, pet guardians, and pet professionals come together to dive into real issues in dog parenting. From controversial training methods to sensitive health topics, we're getting raw and real about what it means to care for our canine companions. Join us every Wednesday for unfiltered conversations, expert insights, and personal stories that will make you laugh, cry, and grow as a pet parent. No topic is off limits and no question goes unanswered. You won't get one perspective here. You'll get them all because every dog is different and every human is too. You can follow along on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Straight Up Dog Talk or by visiting www.straightupdogtalk.com. Tune in from any of your favorite podcast platforms. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk. I'm Em, and we are back again with another amazing guest this week. We have Nellie from the Combine Dog to talk to you about canine nutrition. How are you doing today, Nellie?
Good. How are you?
I am good. I'm excited to have this conversation because nutrition has been kind of a little side passion of mine for the last couple of years. I've learned a lot about bioavailability and what's good and what's not good to put in your dog's body. I think that it's really fascinating that we rely so much on our veterinarians to have a lot of information. But the truth of the matter is veterinarians are not nutritionists and they don't always keep up to date with the food and what's good and what's not good and how we should be feeding our dogs. And I remember when I was a vet tech, and granted, you know, guys, this was a while ago. This was early 2000s, right? I was a vet for 10 years. Then eating your dog raw food meant your dog was going to become violent. Your dog was going to become fickle. Your dog was going to have idiopathic aggression pop up out of nowhere. Now, educated people are having conversations about when dogs were living in the wild and the dogs that are still living in the wild actually catch and eat and digest all of the things. So I know what I have learned is that organ meat is really, really important and really good for your dog. Bone and then the actual meat. So I have some things that I want to talk about with you today. We get your opinions on some things, but these will also educate the listeners because we're going to talk about some things that are kind of different. I know that you specifically feed your dog Yanko a raw diet.
Correct.
You're really good about breaking it down on your account and talking about why you do what you do and how you do it in a cost-effective manner. One of the first things that I want to talk about is grain.
Okay.
This is like a huge debate, right? Grain-free, not grain-free, blah, blah. But again, let's go back to this whole out in nature thing. Your dog is not going to go foraging through a rice field.
In my community, there's a lake, and I always get so upset because there's a sign that says, please don't feed the ducks bread, because that's not species appropriate. It's not like we have bread growing out of a palm tree. What they should be eating is like leaves and worms and stuff like that.
And minnows.
Exactly. So the other day, funny enough, I was talking to someone about chickens, and he was like, I think chickens eat like corn and stuff. And I looked at him like, wow. I guess it's not taught to us, but there is this disconnect between us and nature and what is appropriate or a plant to be given versus a human versus a dog or a cat. They're species appropriate. And then what kibble is, which is a cost-effective way to feed a dog that is giving them something, but it's not nutritionally sound for them in the long run.
I completely agree with you. That is something I did not realize until this last couple of years when I really got into it. First of all, the labels aren't regulated.
Right.
Okay, there literally can be anything in dog food, including wood shavings. Pork.
Yeah. Well, but that could happen with tea. You could buy tea, Lipton tea, and you're like, well, what is in this? And it could just be tea shade. It is very interesting to dive into how do we get meat at the supermarket and how do we get meat at a farm, getting it from a rancher directly. What's the differences and where is the benefits of getting it from this rancher that He could literally tell you this cow was this. It's very different. And I think because of convenience, we just let it happen.
I think that it is an ease. Let's just buy it off the shelf. This is what we've been doing for years. And unfortunately, there are some of them out there that are literally just byproducts of things. They don't even contain real meat or anything in them. And people don't understand. So in my education, what I have learned is that the first three ingredients should be the meat, the organ, and the bone. That is the first three things that you should look for. But grain is technically a filler from what I understand.
Yes.
Okay. And that's the other thing too, is that there are a lot of dogs that have sensitivities to grain, to flowers or certain trees, allergens like peanut butter for some people. So you have to think about that too. So if grain is a filler, then it's not a necessary thing. Also, it's actually kind of hard on their stomach, which makes it absolute nonsense, insane. It does things to my vet tech brain that I'm like, oh shit. Because when a dog gets sick and you bring your dog into the vet's office, what does your vet tell you to do?
Well, they tell you to get Royal Canin, hydrolyzed protein. It's going to make them better.
Or they tell you to spend 3 days on chicken and rice. But there's so much starch in rice. And that's so bad for your dog.
Its glycemic index is really high. It turns into sugar.
Yeah. And from what I've learned from other people over the year is that sugar, flour, starch, all of those things combined together are pretty much in 98% of dog foods out there. And that's contributing potentially to the cancer numbers in dogs.
Correct. There's a lot of different considerations. One thing that I am really into glandular therapy. When I got in dogs, they tell you spay and neuter them, right? And that's something that I now really regret doing to my dog, because what you're literally doing is taking an organ away from them that provides hormones, that provides signals to other organs to perform. And we literally take it out, and sometimes we don't even wait an appropriate time. There's other methods now that help they're not able to reproduce. There's different methods now that exist so that we don't have to take away those hormones that they need.
This parallel made a lot of sense to me. And so hopefully this will make a lot of sense to the listeners, especially if you're a woman. You're 28 years old, you have all kinds of issues, you get masses on your ovaries, and you get infections all the time. And the doctors say you have to have a hysterectomy. You can't have kids. You are losing all of your hormones, and you're immediately dumped into menopause. We're doing that to dogs when they're 6 to 9 months old.
When it's vital, their testicles and their ovaries send signals to their glands to alert other systems in their bodies. And so it does affect their behavior. It does affect their bodies. Now their bodies might be fighting something that they don't really know what it is. And so it develops cancers, it develops illnesses, it develops these things. So there is glandular therapy where, for example, I feed my dog testicles, I feed my dog pancreas, I feed these things to help supplement what he is missing.
Okay. Interesting. I know that there is an alternative spay for female dogs. Is there an alternate neuter as well? Okay, so basically I'm assuming that it's like tying the tubes or something.
Something to that effect. I know that it's available. I know that it's very hard to find a vet that is capable of doing that.
I've got some vets coming on later this year. So hopefully this is a discussion that we'll be able to get really into, because I really want to know. I'm not up to date on medical technology and information anymore, but eventually I'm going to get another dog, and I want to make better decisions when it comes to this kind of stuff, because I think for so long it was the spay and neuter, spay and neuter, spay and neuter campaign.
The other thing is you have to look at it from the other side. There's this breeding thing, right? You don't want to have an accidental litter contributing to what is happening in the shelters. So I want to do the right thing, but I also want to do the right thing here. There's a lot that you have to consider.
Well, and that just taps back into something that I talk about a lot, which is being a responsible pet parent. If you know that your dog is in heat, she does not need to go to the coffee shop. She does not need to go on a walk around the block where the 3 male intact dogs could potentially jump the fence or get out of the front door, something where they could get to her. She can stay at home while she's in heat, and you can find other options, because you're just setting yourself up for failure at that point if you're putting yourself into those situations. It's same with male dogs. You have to be able to have a handle on their behavior. If you see somebody walking down the sidewalk struggling with their dog, or all of a sudden your male dog is real interested in that other dog that's over there, maybe it's time to turn around or go a different direction,
Right.
because there could be some kind of conflict because the other dog is reactive, or maybe she's in heat and now you've got an even bigger conflict. So I think it's just being smart about a lot of things. A minute ago, we were talking about getting meat and how we get meat and where. So this is my big topic that I wanted to talk to you about, because I have been watching so many videos about dehydrating organs and creating your own dog treats, which I think is so cool. And I'm so going to do it this year. I'm going to start doing it. I found a couple dehydrators on Amazon. I'm trying to figure out which one's the best one. I was told, okay, we're going to have a long conversation about this then. But I was also told silicone trays, not the wire trays. Get silicone trays.
I would get the wired trays, but then add silicone.
Okay, so I have an air fryer, okay? And my air fryer has like the metal trays or whatever, but then it has like a silicone one that goes underneath the metal tray. So I'm assuming it's just like that.
Similar. It goes on top, just so it doesn't stick to it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm good with that. And also I know the juices, so you got to catch all that. And that's fun to clean up, but it's worth it, right? So somebody else had sent out a post. I think it was Loose Leash Healer. She's another trainer, and she sent out this whole thing on dehydrating your own food. I was talking about it this weekend because I was telling my sister about it. There's this local meat market, and I'm going to go to this local meat market. And she said, well, my friend goes there and she buys all her meat for her dogs from there. It's a local butcher's place, but it's the one that's known in town. And she said that her friend spends an exorbitant amount of money at this place. Tell me, how the heck, where do I find the person that slaughters the cows? Where do I find the people that do the deer people? Give me the venison, give me the beef. I don't care what it is. I just want the organ meat that they're going to toss out anyway. Right. So how do you find those people?
So the combine dog started by making dog food and dog treats. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I used to do dehydrated single ingredient treat. There's a lot of what you said, right? So when you start doing raw feeding or dehydrating, it gets addictive. You're kind of like, well, I got all the cow stuff. Let me go to a lamb and then goat and then camel and kangaroo. And it's funny. It's funny, but it's true. The more like beaver, I mean, everything that you could tell me, Yanko has tried. I'm like, let's get it for Yanko. Let's try it. It could get pricey when it gets to those kinds of animals like yak and beaver. So that's that. But the dehydrating is really awesome because you source the meat, depending on where you get it. If you get it from a supermarket, you just know the story from the supermarket. But you could also go to local farmers markets, and if there's a meat person there, talk to them and develop relationships with them. You could even Google any type of farms that have cattle or lambs or goat and reach out to them. They will literally be like, this is my next kill. Hunters are a big, interesting thing too, because when you think about their hunting, a lot of times people don't know that they can only hunt one deer in a season, depending on where you are.
In Iowa, that's why it's so good, because we have cows and we have deer hunting all the time, and pheasant and some other thing. But it shouldn't be hard. I just don't know where to.
Just reach out on Facebook groups. I'm sure there's a group that's Iowa hunters or whatever, and make friends with them, because they will literally give you the goods and you learn a lot from them. I learned from the hunters that I've spoken to that there are certain places they can only get one deer, and it's really interesting how they go about catching that deer or whatever animal it is. I know that the person I'm thinking about hunts with a bow and arrow. They don't do. So it's really interesting to hear. You think like, oh, they're killing all the animals, and no, they're not. They're very meticulous as to what they kill and the observation that they have. They look at this animal for at least half an hour before they shoot it, if they're thoughtful in it.
I know what you're getting to about the lotteries in Wyoming, Montana, I think both the Dakotas, and you literally cannot go hunting unless you get pulled, and it might be for a moose, or it might be for a deer, or it might be for an elk, gazelle, but that's it. And you're allowed it, the one or the two, or maybe you get lucky and you get one of each, and you can go out and do that. When I went to Wyoming a few years back, the people that I talked to about the lottery and how it worked, those people depended on being able to kill that animal, process all of that meat, and use every single bit of it for their meals. The person I was there with, their grandfather was making some kind of stew, and they asked me, have you ever had gazelle? And what? No. And they're like, well, you are tonight because that's what's in the stew. And I was like, okay. They don't think that it tasted any different than venison or something like that. It was a little bit milder, I would say, than venison, but I liked it. I thought it was good. It was definitely a different experience. Same thing with dogs, right? I want to give them a different experience. I have been feeding Sunday. I feed both of my dogs eat very different things, okay? Because Toby has pancreatitis, so he cannot have a raw diet because his stomach is
no high fat.
Yeah, it can't do it. So he actually eats open farm venison diet, which is what I was told the best for dogs who have sensitive stomach. We also use our Pet Matrix supplements. Since he's been on the Pet Matrix supplements and the open farm for about 1.5 years now, he hasn't had a single pancreatic flare up in a 1.5 years. So I'm very, very happy with where he's at. Also, he seems to be aging backwards. He's somewhere between 13 and 14 years old.
So he's not a
and he's like, what? He's got some spunk in him now. I'm like, okay, all right, I can tell. Also, the poops are smaller, which is another thing that we can talk about in a minute, because that's pretty important. Fitz gets dog-friendly peanut butter smeared on the bottom of his bowl and then frozen. And then he gets his Pet Matrix supplements, because it's powder, sprinkled onto it. And then I kind of like rotate around and coat the bowl. And then he gets sundaes if he's eating out of a bowl that day. Fitz only eats out of the bowl if I have to go to physical work. Fitz eats out of the bowl, and so does Toby. Everything is hand-fed in this house because we use it for training opportunities all day long on our walks in the backyard.
Which is the way to do it.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think enough people understand it's not that difficult to put your dog's portion of food in your training pouch and carry it around with you for the day. It really is not. And I like Sundays because it breaks up very easily. And let's be honest here, I ate a piece of it. It tastes like beef jerky. Yeah. And the only thing in it that I don't necessarily like, because this is something else that I've learned, is that seed oils are not good for dogs.
Well,
it has sunflower oil in it.
Seed oils are not good for humans or anyone.
So it does have some sunflower oil in it. I don't know what the percentage of is, but I will tell you what, that dog, he has more energy than he already had, which was a lot. But his attention span is much longer. I think that has to do with the Think from Pet Matrix, which is their neurological supplement. And then he is just hot. I know that that's from the diet, and I know that that's from all of the activity that he has, but he is just a beast. And for the first time in his entire life, this last year-ish that he's been on Sundays, he eats all of his food every single time. Before, when he was on Science Diet or Blue Buffalo or whatever other brand we were using, he wouldn't eat it, or he would pickily eat it, or I would have to mix stuff into it to get him to eat it. And I switched him to open farms for a while, and he liked it okay. But man, I'm willing to pay a little bit more extra for the Sundays just because it seems to be working well for him. My goal would be to get him on a raw diet, but I don't think that it's fair to give him raw food and not give Toby raw food. I have this horrible, like, oh, I'm so sorry, Toby, you only get this, like, whatever. Plus, for training ease, it's the Sundays is excellent for training ease.
So what I do, Yanko is on raw. He does hunt away in the morning, and then the raw that I make him for dinner. And that's been a journey because he didn't used to accept raw. He didn't like raw. So it was a process. My food company was cooked. And when he was a puppy, his gut microbiome was weird. We're not doing this raw thing. And it took a while for him to develop. That's how I like to see it. The ability to eat raw. He doesn't really eat 100% raw. His bones are dehydrated or freeze dried. He's very picky with poultry. What I did want to say though is that hearing what you're saying, you are feeding the dog in front of you, which is awesome because some people literally just buy one bag for 2 dogs.
I've never done that actually, which is kind of wild now that I think about it, because even back in the day, I had all different breeds. And while a lot of it was science diet, that's what I fed for years and years and years, because science diet would come and educate at a lot of the practices. They come in, they tell you all the things that they do. Science diet has a cool program. I'm not going to lie. I love that they have the facility where they have homeless animals and they feed them and train them. And eventually, a few years in or so, people wait on a list to take those dogs into their homes, which I think is fantastic.
Right.
But there's still stuff in those foods that's not good for dogs to be eating. And somebody who has really started to learn about what's good and what's not good, my newest obsession is telling people not to feed their dogs greenies. Not only do they have too much starch that converts to sugar, you're literally putting plaque on your dog's teeth with the greenies. It's not actually doing dental work.
Like when you eat a marshmallow.
Yeah.
Sometimes it sticks all over you. That's what it is. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. Oddly enough, none of my dogs have ever liked greenies, so I stopped giving them years ago, but I learned that this year.
Oh, and that could become addicting. Your dog likes the taste of sugar, so that could become addicting.
Let's talk about flour. That's another one that I had no idea was such a thing. Bleached flour is not okay. Now, I know that some people use oats or almonds and they put them in their food ninjas and they take the raw oats or almonds or cashews or peanuts and they make their own. And that I totally see as a different situation, but they have to be raw. They can't be processed. And again, not natural. Your dog's not going out and finding flour buckets in the fields and eating out of the flour buckets. So Tell the listeners a little bit about why flour is bad for your dogs, because this is one of the areas that I find pretty fascinating.
First things first, your dog doesn't naturally have enzymes like we do. When we eat something made out of flour or carbs, we have an enzyme that starts digesting them. We also have a long digestive tract. Dogs don't have the enzyme or a long digestive tract. So for them, it basically doesn't digest. It just sits around in their stomach, sits around in their intestines, sits around in their gut microbiome, makes the gut microbiome angry. It clears their
inflammation.
Yeah, inflammation. So it's just not something you would give your dog. And so when you start looking at greenies has flour, it's interesting to see what people do for not only convenience, but also for breed. They're basically making your dog sicker so you can take them to the vet.
And I want to make a really quick point here, because if you come in this far, I don't want people to think that I am judging anybody for what they're feeding your dog. Because some people cannot afford. Sundays is expensive. I'm not even going to joke around about how expensive it is.
Here's the thing. And you talked about it with being a responsible dog guardian. I don't like the word owner. To me, that,
I don't either.
That has like power over you. And
the possession thing.
Yeah. For me, to be a responsible dog guardian is looking at your finances and saying, what is the best dog food I could afford with what I could pay. Do research based on that. I'll tell you that I'm pretty sure you'll find something pretty awesome out there. There are some companies that do really good stuff depending on the size of the dog that you have. You can't really compare a Chihuahua that's 5 pounds to a 60-pound dog.
That's exactly my situation. I've got a 12-pound Chihuahua and a 62-pound mixed breed, and they eat 2 totally different things. The only thing that's the same for them is their supplements. Nothing else is the same.
Right. You're doing the work. You're considering the dog in front of you, and you're also considering what is the best meal I could feed. It's amazing to see what adding blueberries or adding table scraps, that's the easiest way for you to add some nutrition and some variety to their meals, to their bowls. Because that's the other thing. The dog owner goes and buys a bag of Purina or whatever, but doesn't consider what is in it and really doesn't consider how it makes the dog feel. It could be causing inflammation, or they could have allergies, and it might not even be something that the person is even thinking about.
Here's another funny thing too. I've learned that there are certain vegetables that I can't give to Toby because of his pancreatitis, because they just rip up his gut. You can't eat cucumbers, peppers. You can give your dogs peppers. Can't give them to Toby. he can't have anything that's
Right.
rough because it just rips his little gut up. And then we have diarrhea and bloating and vomiting, and that's no fun for anybody. But he can have green beans and he loves them. So you have to be really mindful. Just like people have allergies, lactose intolerance, peanut allergies. I'm allergic to cinnamon, which people are like, what? But
What?
yeah, I'm allergic to cinnamon. I hate the holidays because anytime I walk in somewhere, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I can't be in here. I gotta go. I need my EpiPen. It's in the car.
Oh my God.
But that kind of stuff, that when you have an allergy
Mhm.
or a food intolerance, you're more likely to read labels than other people, even when it comes to your dog, because you don't want that same thing to happen to your dog.
Right.
Let's talk about poop, because I think that is the one thing that I did not even think about. I mean, the vet tech, right? We look at your dog's poop under a microscope, and we look at the bugs, and we look at the viruses and all the neat stuff under the microscope. It's actually pretty cool. The little fecal slides are pretty cool to look at. You would not believe the things you can see under a microscope in dog poop. But the biggest wake up call to me when I started changing their diets, when I started making sure they had the right amount of supplements, because that's another point here.
Well,
People over supplement their dog. When we got into the right pattern, I watched my dog's poop piles go from these massive, because Toby, my little 12-pound dog, was having poops just as big as Fitz was.
oh my gosh.
Like massive, huge poops. And why that is because they're not processing
Correct.
all that extra garbage that's in their food. So when I watch their poops go from runny or inconsistent, even solid, huge piles of poop to maybe 2 little pieces each now, I was shocked. But the only bad thing about it is Toby's a poop eater. So I have to be on the ready
Right.
anytime anybody poops, because Toby will eat it otherwise.
Oh,
He's
wow.
so bad about it. I'm pretty sure that came from his origin story. I'm pretty sure he was kept in a crate and 75% of his meals were poop. I've just never been able to break the habit. I've tried everything, and he won't do it. Some people are like, put a muzzle on him. I'm like, 14 years old, I'm not going to put a muzzle on him. If he has a stomach issue, that's on him at this point. I tried. So I'm very, very mindful when it comes to when they got to the bathroom, because I try to make sure he doesn't get it. I keep a bucket in my backyard. I have a big backyard. Keep a pooper scooper and a bucket with a lid. It has a trash bag in it. And every day I go around however many times and I pick up poop. I used to have to change that bag once a week. Now I still change it quite frequently in the summer because it does stink and bugs grow in it if you don't change it. But in the winter, I usually only have to empty it like once a month now, which is crazy to me that we went from having a bag of poop every week to a bag of poop every month, because they're actually benefiting from the nutrients.
Correct.
And they're processing the amount of food. Yes, bioavailability. Let's talk about bioavailability.
Yeah.
I love bioavailability. So let's talk about how bioavailability relates to poop.
Go back to the flour thing. So remember, it's giving your dog inflammation and it's sitting in their digestive tract forever. And when they finally poop it out, it's massive. They didn't absorb any of that. And if anything, it's absorbing water. They're not absorbing any of the nutrients that the flour, or at that point, even the meat, they're just surviving at that point. You could give them cardboard and they're going to poop it out the same way. They're not really absorbing anything. When you give them a whole food diet, or as close to a whole food diet as you could get, their bodies are going to take all the nutrients because it's available to them. I did a video on it on YouTube that you could go check it out, which is about milk and how raw diet is like fresh milk versus kibble that it's like powdered milk. And you have to mix it. It's dehydrated. It's powdered milk. Its nutrients are removed. And for you to absorb it, you have to add water to it. And even then, you're not going to absorb what fresh milk is going to get. So when you think about it like that, adding table scraps, I know that this isn't an easy topic for people because it's like out my pocket. I got to do things. But it really does improve their health, their wellness, their attitude. Believe it or not, kibble could manipulate the way that they feel hormonally because they're lacking certain hormones because they're not absorbing all those nutrients that they need to function.
Which is, I think, another point too, which you made earlier, which is that gives them variety, right? I sure as heck don't want to eat the same thing
Right.
every day. I'm not in college anymore. I don't want a peanut butter sandwich and ramen every day because I'm broke, right? I don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
I'm not in college anymore. So don't treat your dog like they're in college. Do a little bit better, especially what is it? I think they call them dinks.
The what?
Dual income, no kids, dinks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, well.
dual income, no kids, dinks.
Okay.
But they have dogs and they
Uh-huh.
spoil the heck out of their
Well,
dogs. Okay, so let me be clear because this platform is very much about educating and about pointing out how social media portrays certain things on the internet. So listen up, dinks. What we're talking about here, it costs a little bit more money. Yes, it takes a little bit more effort, but make sure that if you are willing to spend the money, you're putting it in the right place.
well, I mean, I'd rather spend money on making my dog's food because then it becomes fun. It became a rhythm for me. I literally I'm going to make my dog's food and it gets addicting. You have kangaroo today? Oh, that's interesting. I can't wait to play with the kangaroo. Honestly, you have to look at it. If it's something that is hard for you, look at it as something that's going to enrich your mind because not only is it going to be awesome and beneficial for you, you're learning a lot about what these foods do for your body, but then what it does to your dog, their body. Like you were saying, the poop tells you so much about how they're absorbing the food. And it's weird because when you're a child, you're like, oh, poop. Shit, I'm there with a doggy bag. I break the poop. It's just, sorry, that's gross, right? But I'm
Gross. You're
like
collecting information.
yeah, I'm collecting information. Exactly. And I learned so much from doing that from my dog. If I introduce a new food and I see it, it literally tells me, okay, well, he wasn't able to digest this. This is not something I want.
Yeah, exactly. You can see a whole piece of spinach. You can see blood. You can see sticks. You can
Worms.
see cardboard. You can see all of the things that your dog got into in that afternoon or maybe the evening before because it all comes out in the poop. And if more people paid attention to their dog's poop, we would have less emergency surgeries. We would have less parvo getting to the point where it's killing puppies. We would have all kinds of things that would be much more detectable because most people don't pay attention to their dogs in the way that you and I do. All right, let me reference our blog here. I co-wrote a blog with you for your blog, and we talk about all the silly things that we do to entertain our dogs. But you and I are very much alike when it comes to how invested we are in our dogs. And we both have that sciencey mind and we're both looking for information and we're putting in our theories and we're fact checking ourselves and we're reaching out for that information. And that's why I'm saying if you're out there and you're dual income, no kids, and you want to spend money on your dog.
Yeah, spend it on the food.
Spend it on the food. Spend it on the food and spend it on the right supplements. And get the bully sticks, get the chews, get the natural things that are good for your dog. And don't just go buy 1,500 lick mats. I'm not saying I use lick mats. Trust me, I use them. I put them. But that's not the only solution here.
Yeah. They're
lick mats, everybody's like enrichment, and they're like, oh, lick mat. And I'm like,
right.
no.
Okay, I'm a certified canine nutritionist, but I'm also a canine wellness expert. So I am first aid and CPR trained, and I have this background in mental health for dogs. I studied architecture. I love watching because I learned so much from watching. It was just something I was trained in. And so a thing that I wish people would learn when you have a dog or any pet for that matter is to learn to observe and digest what you're watching. Listen to what you're watching because it tells you a lot. Yeah, lick mats help, but there's also other ways to enrich your dog. You get your dog's bowl and feed them somewhere that they have never been fed before because it changes the smell of their food. Because it's in a new environment. The air vent could be different. There's so much happening. And you don't know to the level of their mind is like, whoa, this is so cool. And this is so different. And they need that.
Also, with dogs, their sense of smell is 10,000 times more than what ours is. Somebody explained this to me at one point, and they said that to compare human scent to a dog scent.
No, there's nothing.
There isn't, but the closest example I got was put bacon in the microwave, let it cook, and then open the microwave, and that smell, that level of intensity is the very bottom of the dog's nose spectrum. Because not only is their sense of smell incredible, but they are smelling all of the smells at the same time, and they can pick out one by one. Like they can pluck out the scents and make, okay, that's over there. Oh, that's over there.
They have a gland in their mouth for them to taste the smell, which is
what makes their teeth chatter.
Exactly.
And that actually makes the airflow faster so that they can smell the scent more clear. I learned that this year. I thought that was so cool.
No, that's literally how they see the world. Literally. And so use that to your advantage.
That just brings us right back to body language and why it's so important to understand what your dog is doing, because dogs process the world in an entirely different way than we do. That motorcycle that kicked 3 or 4 blocks over that we heard, your dog hears that amplified. That sounds like it was right outside to them. And so when you have a dog that's sound sensitive or smell sensitive, or they're triggered by something that is movement sensitive, they're communicating to you, that bothered me, versus people all of a sudden, well, I don't like that behavior. My dog's acting bad, or my dog is being defiant, or my dog doesn't, whatever. You're putting your dog in a world that they are not made for. Dogs were made to have jobs, and even the dogs whose jobs were literally to sit in people's laps and keep them warm, even those dogs are struggling to this day, because they don't have the same kind of interaction, because people go to work and the dog can't just sit in their lap and be attended to 24/7. Royal families had dogs in their laps to keep fleas and flies away from them, to keep their laps warm. People don't think about the history of a dog.
And the anxiety that creates.
Yeah. And regardless of how much a dog evolves over time, their body still needs the same thing. Just like people, we still need the same nutrients. We still need the same things. The more we grow as humanity, we're just constantly plugging in all of this processed stuff into our diets. And we're wondering, why are people getting sick? Why are we having so much cancer? Why are we having all these heart attacks? Why is everyone's cholesterol so high? Why is everyone's stress and anxiety out of control? What are they to themselves?
And when we talk about stress, I think a lot of people underestimate the power of stress, the power that anxiety has over us, over our mind, mental health alone. Some people not even accepting that. It's not even easy to get a therapist. To find a therapist that works for your specific issue. You have to go through a lot, and a lot of people don't consider it.
A lot of people just take the first therapist that they get, and they don't advocate for themselves or try to do something different. And I think that's a really hard lesson that I learned for myself after I had my brain surgery. It took me about 3 years, and then I moved back to Iowa, but I didn't have somebody who was advocating for me, because no one was listening to me about the things that I was feeling, or I don't feel right. I feel like a zombie. I feel this way. I feel that way. And come to find out, I'm on so much medication that I can't even think straight, but I'm also having an allergic reaction to Diamox, which is making me turn into a zombie, and it's having the reverse effect on me. Diamox is a diuretic. It's supposed to push water out of you. But because I was having an allergic reaction, inflammation, so now I'm retaining water, I'm retaining salt. I went up to 230 pounds. And as soon as my doctor here in Iowa was like, I don't know, I can tell you're not, whatever, we're going to stop. So they slowly took me off of it, and they took me off a couple of other medications too, and got me down to like a base level of stuff. And
how did you feel?
Amazing.
Yeah.
But you know how much I weigh now? 140 pounds.
Wow.
And I'm not on all of these medications that kept me all foggy and just out of it. But I had to find doctors that were listening to me, that were listening to my pain points. And dogs can't do that. Dogs can't look at you and say, my stomach hurts, my ear hurts. They can't do that. So you have to look at their body in order to be able to tell.
Yep. Tail to snout, checking your dog's body.
Every single day, we both do body checks.
Yep.
I found a lump in Toby's tummy, and I'm worried about it.
Don't tell me that. That's so scary.
It's so scary. It's just, think of how much later I would have found it.
Exactly.
If I hadn't been checking for it. I know every inch of his body.
The other thing is that I don't know if how many times it's happened to you, but I've caught bumps, and it's gotten to the point because now it's what, 7 years. Yanko's almost going to be 7 years of checking, and so now when I find a bump, I'm like, okay, well, this feels similar to this one. You have more of a frame of reference. I'm not going to go like a psycho to my vet, although my vet probably thinks I am, to that point of like mental health and all that stuff. Also finding a vet that will advocate for you. Yeah, I love my vet.
Lucky though, because my vet knows that I was a vet tech.
Okay.
So he knows that when I come in, it's serious because he knows I'm not going to play around and waste his time. I have caught Toby on the edge. I know he's having a pancreatic flare up, and I'll come in and I'll be like, hey, Greg, this is where we're at. This is what we're doing. And he's like, I don't know. It could be his back. It could be this. Let me do a few checks. I'm like, okay. And so this is when we first started going there. And he comes back and he's like, well, we did the SNAP test and he tested barely positive for pancreatitis. Spine looks great, blah, 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 blah. He's like, I've never had somebody just say, this is my dog's diagnosis. Give medication before. And I'm like, well, I knew my dog. He's like, I know, I love to see it. That kind of relationship with your veterinarian is so important. Your vet should listen to you. And if you have a vet that's not listening to you, I'm the one that does. Just like your therapist for you. If your therapist isn't listening to you, find a different one. Don't stick around. Get out of there.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of time convenience takes over.
And some people are scared of change too, right? Like change is hard. It's hard enough, I understand, to go find a vet. It's hard enough to find a therapist. It's hard enough to find a new coffee place. I understand those things are hard, but sometimes in order for things to get better, you have to change. They have to change.
For you to grow, you have to.
Yeah. And it's hard. That's all I've been doing for the last 2 years is change, growth. It's hard. But like I just said a few minutes ago, I feel like my oldest dog is aging backwards. And that says something to me. That shows me that I've been putting in the work. Let's talk about supplements.
Okay.
This episode's going to be a long one, guys. I hope you're ready for this. So supplements, I feel like I got really lucky. I have a really great relationship with Tanisha from Pet Matrix. All of their supplements are 100% bioavailable. And I have seen my dog go from not being able to jump up on furniture anymore because he's old to jumping back up on furniture again. I have seen him go from having pancreatic attacks once a week to not having one in a year and a half. I have seen him go from a dog that didn't like to play or engage to getting invested in enrichment and playing his little ping pong game. I know some of you guys have seen it from your blog and from the post that I put on Instagram. Toby's winging his little ping pong balls around out of his cupcake pan. He's so funny. He's such a funny little dog. But before, because he was not healthy, because he went from being completely emaciated and abused to me letting him get fat because he resource guarded and you couldn't get anywhere near his bowl and he wouldn't let me just feed him and eat it. We and I have been together a long time. We've come a long way in 11 years. Now he knows when he gets his food, it's either going to be through training or it's because I have to go to work, and he gets to eat in his area and Fitz eats in his area, and we don't cross over. They only get to eat in close areas if I am right there and I am managing them. But most of the time, I don't recommend that people feed their dogs in the same area because you never know at any point, right? That's always a wild card. But as far as supplements, I never did supplement ever for any of my dogs until these two, when I started asking around and luckily stumbled onto Tanisha, who was human nutritionist that transferred to dog nutritionist. And the cool thing about Pet Matrix products is that on their label, it says human tested, pet approved, and you can actually take their supplements and it will help you. So I've taken their Move supplement and it has helped with inflammation and muscle pain that I have, which she and I have talked about, which I think is really cool. So I think that it's really cool that they have a set. It's a set of 3. They have Protect, Think, and Move. And it covers all of the things that your dog needs. And it doesn't over supplement your dog. Now, I find that there are a lot of people out there, a lot of content creators, a lot of influencers that pick up certain brands. I'm going to throw one out there just because
Okay.
I am that person, and I like to call them as I see them. Woof.
Okay.
Have you read the label for Woof?
Of course. So
Everyone can't see my big, huge eyes right now. There's so much crap in those. It's not good for your dogs.
There's a lot of them that are supplements, and you're like, okay. It's a hard place to be. I would say that anyone could be called a supplement, right? There's no regulation for a lot of these. You kind of have to test I'm very much going to try. And so a lot of, even the raw, I won't eat it raw, but I will cook it and taste this, and this. We're going to feed it to Ying. The same thing with supplements. I'm a believer in having natural. I do not believe in synthetic vitamins or minerals or anything like that. The dog's body is probably not going to absorb it. Their receptors are pretty good. They know what's natural and what's not natural. So if it's not natural, more than likely they're not going to absorb it. So you're just giving them sugars. Bad.
Well, and that was one thing that I learned about salmon oil. It's like the seed oils. Dogs' bodies, like you said about the flour and the carbohydrates, their bodies just push that out. So you're squirting all that salmon oil that you just spent $35 on, and it's not doing anything for your dog.
I will tell you that if you want to give omega-3s, just buy salmon or buy sardines. Go directly to the source. You don't know how long that's been sitting on the shelf. Oils go rancid. That's my first big no. Oils could go rancid, fats go rancid really quickly. And then secondly, why not give them something that is available to them right away? You're just getting it from the source. They're getting a whole lot more vitamins, a whole lot more nutrients from the salmon or the sardines that you're giving.
Okay. So with that being said, what are your top 10, if you can think of 10, top 10 things to add into a raw meat diet? Let's say we've already got the meat in there, we've already got the bone in there, and we've already got an organ in there. So we have beef, and we have a beef liver, and we have some kind of bone. I don't even know what we would have in there, but we have that. What are you going to add to that?
I mean, off the bat, sardines. I'm not feeding this all the time. You need to vary the diet, but I think sardines, and they're super easy. They're $1.50 at Trader Joe's. The can, fresh spring water, nothing else added to it. Pop it open. You give it to your dog. They're getting omegas, extra protein. Depending on the brand, you might get some bones, but they're fine for them to eat them. Pick number 2, dandelion root or dandelion. People think it's a weed. It detoxes. It has so much benefits to your dog. Mushrooms are another thing. Magical mushrooms. There's so many different mushrooms, and they have each so many different properties that help your dog. So like lion's mane. I'm trying to think what lion's mane, I think, is for a mental mind, I think. There's so many different ones that you could just literally take to benefit your dog.
We have another supplement company that we've been working with recently, and I specifically picked them because they're called Mush Buddies. And they have 7 different kinds of mushrooms in there, and everything's all natural. They have an additive for preservative, and it's a joint and mobility, but it doesn't have any stuff in it that I'm not okay with. And my dogs love it. But they have mushrooms in there for, cancer prevention, joint mobility, inflammation, all that kind of stuff. And mushrooms, I've also learned this year, yes, huge amounts of benefits for mushrooms and dogs. Where do you get mushrooms from? Can you find these different kinds at Trader Joe's? Do you have to go to a co-op? Are we looking at Whole Foods situation here?
Again, you have to shop around. Whole Foods has them, but you have to be lucky. You might have lion's mane or oyster, or just have to go and find. Button mushrooms are pretty good, but they don't have the medicinal benefits like lion's mane, or I don't know why that's the only one I could think of.
I know there's reishi.
Reishi is for, I use a lot of reishi because I'm a runner, and that helps with lactic acid and to help with the inflammation in your bones and joints. I mean, there's just so many different mushrooms, and they have so many different properties that help specific organs of the body.
I feel like we need a mushroom chart that has all the mushrooms on it and why it's important for your dog's diet. Now, when you feed mushrooms, do you cook the mushrooms or you just leave them completely raw and toss them in? Stems and...
No, I cook them.
Okay.
Yeah, I cook them. I mean, I've done different things. Like I've cooked them, but I've also dehydrated them. I've purchased from different places that I know have good supplements for my dog. Yeah.
Do you give the stem of the mushroom or do you take that out?
No, I give
Okay. What's something else you would throw in?
bone broth,
That's a good one.
goat's milk,
We use kefir or kefir, however the heck you say it.
Kefir is good.
They like it because it's stinky. Well, I open that up and both my dogs are right there. I need to get some sardines because we've never done that.
Okay.
I know anytime it's stinky, both my dogs come running. They're like, oh, what's that?
Well, yeah, there's a Trader Joe's goat kefir that is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trader Joe's and the Whole Foods. They don't have it here in Cedar Rapids. Down. We do have a Pioneer Co-op, and that's one of those things I need to go and I need to explore.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's another reason to get the dehydrator. What got me started on this whole thing was I got dehydrated sweet potato treats at this pet expo that I was at for the podcast. I brought them home and I let Fitz eat them. And it was the funniest thing I've ever seen because he's trying to chew on it. He's never had anything so crunchy. I just paid like $8 for this. I could do this myself. And then I started research. That's what happened. So what else would you add?
The other thing that you just brought up, sweet potatoes, making them in different ways. When you cook them, is a different experience for your dog than dehydrating them. Yanko doesn't like dehydrated sweet potato, but he all day will eat roasted sweet potato.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe it's the consistency or the texture or the smell, but it's fascinating to see. I do a lot of different experiments with Yanko where I give him different foods to try just to see what it brings up in him.
Do the same thing because Fitz is a picky eater. So I'm like, okay, well, are you going to eat this? Are you going to eat that? Are you going to try this? Are you going to try that?
Did you expect him to eat the sweet potato?
No, I didn't, honestly. I didn't think that he would eat it. Toby is the opposite. He's my little garbage disposal dog. I can give Toby anything and he will eat it. So I have to be really careful when I'm just cooking in general because if it's something that he can't have, which we'll touch on here in just a second, he will go for it anyway. But I will tell you, there is one thing that Toby will not eat. Ginger. Weird, right?
It's because it's the tanginess.
I don't know. If I'm peeling carrots and he gets the carrot peels, they fall on the floor. He eats them. If I'm peeling ginger or potatoes, he goes right for it. And then he goes, bleh. And he just spits it out. And he looks at me like, eh. And I'm like, really? So then I cut it up and gave him a tiny little piece of it. And he just looked at me like I was insane. So anytime he knows that there's ginger, which isn't very often, and sometimes I do those Hello Fresh meals and they send ginger. And so I'm cooking with ginger and Toby's like, nope, don't give me any of that. And Fitz won't eat it either. But it's the one thing in 11 years that I have found that Toby is like, no, thank you.
Interesting. Golden paste would be awesome, especially for an older dog for joints and inflammation. I add turmeric and ginger, but it's turmeric to help with the inflammation. I add the ginger and then it has pepper so that it's absorbed.
I wonder if he would eat that. Maybe it's just the one solo thing by itself. Okay, so we've got mushroom, golden paste, bone broth, kefir, raw goat's milk. Gosh, you've listed so many things. The dandelion. I love that you said that because every time the dandelions start coming up in the spring, I just start collecting them. I didn't know that people didn't know that dandelions help prevent allergies in dogs. Honey does the same thing. You buy local honey to help with your human allergies. Guess what? It helps dogs too. Not too much honey though, because there's sugar, so you have to be careful how much you give. But it does help. It's better that than a bunch of allergy medications and injections and all that kind of stuff. And it might not do the job, but at least it's working a little bit, I'm sure, as a preventative. I mean, Fitz has really bad allergies. Toby's all white and Fitz is mostly white. So that's a thing. White dogs are allergy dogs. Just one of those things that I pay a little bit more attention to because I have the background in that. Dandelions are great. You can go out in your yard, you can pick the dandelions, and you can dry them. You probably can put them in the dehydrator too.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Another thing that I can test out.
I've given it to Yanko raw. I've given it to him dehydrated. I've seen them.
I'm walking around the yard picking them. Toby will follow me and expect me to feed him the dandelions as I'm walking around. So it's pretty cool because he will just eat them. You mentioned blueberries earlier, which is, I always tell people blueberries because antioxidants.
It's like the best berry. I guess it's the best berry. Any berry, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, cranberries.
Cranberries, really? You have to take the stem off of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on the dog, it's kind of like the ginger. It's very like tangy taste. So some dogs will be like, whoa, I puree 'em with bone broth
Okay.
or freeze them. Freezing sometimes it's
Oh, yeah.
better. Yeah.
We use Brinkley's. It's smoothies for
Mhm.
dogs, and she prepackages them and putting that into molds in the freezer. Strawberry, banana, mango with a little bit of kefir in it, and then we just freeze it, and now you have a little popsicle that you can have. Just those simple things. I found this really fun for me. Like you said that
Yeah.
earlier, it's enrichment for you. This is fun. Might not always look pretty. There's so many accounts out there, and there are some that do a beautiful job of creating those
Yeah. It's like
color, aesthetic.
artwork.
Yeah, it is. It's art. There's like dried flowers and all this stuff. But then again, here they are squirting the salmon oil on it. There is that balance that you have to find, because if you're over supplementing your dog is just ejecting money out of their rear end. Honestly, that's what's happening. If you are willing to spend that kind of money and that kind of time on your dog, make sure you are investing in the right products.
Yeah.
You are such a great resource for that, because you have
Thank you.
so much information, and you always have these incredible videos when you're preparing Yanko's food and talking about why you're doing what you're doing. It's been a huge part of my education in the last
you.
6 or 8 months since we found
Oh.
each other. I really enjoy watching it, because I do learn a lot from you. I think that it's something that we need to be talking more about. I think that if more people knew and understood, there are easy, simple ways that you can make effective change in your dog's health without funneling money into big box corporations
Right.
that are not healthy for your dog.
Right. Or to sit for a whole day stressed out, you're stressed, your dog's stressed, and you're spending out. I would rather spend the money on months of food for my dog.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. It's like when people talk about the kind of toys they give their dogs, right? Immediately, if somebody brings me a basket of toys and they say, we've had these issues at the vet, these are the toys that we usually play with. And I guarantee you, 99% of the time, there's a rope toy in that basket.
Well,
Throw out the rope toy. Get rid of it. You want your dog's intestines tangled up? Give them that rope toy back. I guarantee that you will have some kind of an emergency. And if you've never had an emergency because of a rope toy, you are a lucky person.
for me, it wasn't a rope toy. For me, it was sticks. It's a free toy. But I would tell you, please don't give it to her. What happened to me with Yanko, it literally went to the back of the molar and we couldn't take it out. He had to go to the vet and he was put under. This is where it gets worse. I have a friend who was also watching her dog, and what ended up happening was her dog got a splinter.
I've seen that happen in
And
organs.
she didn't know that the dog got a splinter until like his face got.
Infection. Yeah. I've seen it happen in organs too.
Again, when we talk about this balance, right, there's a balance between wanting to be a dog. But I'm also going to do the best that I can to make sure he doesn't have a bad experience with a stick.
Again, that's everything in moderation, and you do have to know what you're signing up for. I think that it's really important to understand that accidents are going to happen, especially if you go on adventures with your dogs. You just have to be aware of that kind of stuff. And that's why it's really important to make sure that your dog is healthy. So let's talk about things that dogs should not have. In regards to food, there's obvious ones, but there are other things that are not super great for dogs.
To an extent, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I really, really hate is the pup cup.
Really?
Yeah. Whipped cream is a lot of fat and a lot of sugar. So again, balance. My dog has had that. I did a video on it and it got a lot of hate, and it was regarding a pup cup. And yeah, it's adorable. It's super cute that your dog likes this pup cup and you're giving him a special treat, but it's not adorable when they have accidents because they have so much fat in their body, or they're hyper because you gave them 900 pup cups.
Wow, I never thought.
My point is learning to advocate for your dog at those moments, because I'm a very big pushover. I don't like confrontation. And so one thing that I've learned with my dog is I need to advocate for them, because otherwise it's not going to get advocated. He doesn't speak English.
Yep. My dog get pup cups for their birthdays, and then occasionally throughout the year. They don't get them very often. But I also don't drink coffee, like, ever. The only time I ever drink Starbucks coffee is when they have the caramel brulee lattes out for Christmas time. And then I have one every single week.
Well,
I don't drink soda and I don't drink coffee.
they have this honey citrus mint tea. That's what I drink. But I go and I order for my brother, and they're just like, "Oh my God, can I give Yiko a cup?" And I'm just like, "Well,
Okay, what's the ruling on garlic? Because I have heard arguments on both sides of garlic.
I think garlic is in my top 10 must give."
So what are the benefits?
It's antiviral, anti-inflammatory. I'm not going to say that it keeps bugs away, but it does keep them at a distance. When it comes to can it help with heartworm, I rather give the medication because it's going to take away stress not only from me, but from my dog feeling me.
You know that the medication is going to work. Yeah. Okay.
I've had conversations with people that are like, well, when you give the medication, if the mosquito bites them and it has heartworm, it'll kill that heartworm. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works.
Trust me, I've had very similar conversations working in the veterinary office.
Yeah.
People do not understand how medication works all the time, unfortunately, and it can be really frustrating. But that is why a lot of those medications, if you can prove that you've been giving it year round, they will cover heartworm treatment because your dog still can get a positive
Correct.
test even if they're on the prevention. It's very, very rare.
Correct.
But it can happen.
Right. If we're talking about hookworms and stuff,
Oh.
you give your dog the medication all day long, but if he smells poop that has hookworms, he's going to get the hookworms. Sorry to tell you.
Yep. And that's one thing that I am so glad that I don't have to worry about other dogs being in my yard. But we have deer, we have raccoon, we have possum, we have squirrels, we have rabbits. Guess what? All of those animals can have those parasites, all of them. It's called zoonotic diseases, which means it can transfer between animals to animals, different species to different species, but also it can go from dog or deer or rabbit to person.
Exactly.
And people don't know that, which is wild to me. It's wild to me. People are, look at what's in my hand. Oh my goodness, that is ringworm all over your hands. Okay. We're going to get you some gloves.
My
And we're
God.
going to have a conversation about this. Scabies
No way.
down the side of people's necks. Scabies because their dog had scabies and they were sleeping with their dog all pressed up against them.
How common?
When I was a vet tech, I was in Texas. And so it's warmer climate down there. So pretty freaking common because people did not know what they were doing and they're handling things. And parvo's really bad down south too, because in Iowa, the ground freezes and parvo can live in the ground up to 8 feet. So when the ground freezes here, more than likely, most of it dies off. But in Texas, that doesn't happen. And the way the diseases work, a lot of people just don't understand when it comes to zoonotic diseases. One of my first vet clinics that I worked at, this guy and this dog literally passed back and forth this viral bronchitis strep throat thing between the two of them for like a month. And so every other week, the guy and the dog were coming in and one of them was sick. And he'd be like, we need antibiotics because now I've got it. Well, finally, it took about a month and nobody was sick anymore. But I was like, okay, need to go home, get some bleach, and we need to clean everything, and we need to hire somebody to clean the furniture. And that's another thing that people don't think about. Pay for the prevention, guys. It's cheaper to pay for the prevention than it is to pay to fix the problem and the treatment. The heartworm treatment is expensive, and getting rid of fleas,
it's hard.
Getting rid of fleas is expensive. And if you have to bomb your house, you can't live in your house for a certain amount of time. And then you have to clean everything up before you can even let your pets back in it because it's toxic. It's so expensive and it's so inconvenient. You want to talk about inconvenient? Jeez Louise. Okay, so what else can't dogs have or shouldn't have? Toxic. We're talking like what's toxic? Grapes and onions are the two that I know that are really bad.
I want to say something that's not food related, which is brain. Since dogs are low to the ground and their main source of learning about the environment is their nose, they ingest a lot of heavy metals, toxins, dust, all this stuff. So being mindful of that. If you paint, be mindful that that paint is something that is safe. Even the stuff that you use to clean, try to make sure that it's something that is not toxic?
I have migraines and I cannot handle the scent like Mr. Clean or
Well,
Pine Sol or even bleach. So unless it's something really extreme at my house and somebody's really sick, I don't use those kind of products.
right.
Lysol, anything, because it
Well,
makes me sick. And since we're on that point, fragrances, candles, the wall plug-in things, all that stuff is so bad for your dogs. So bad for your dogs.
yeah. I mean, there's been cases where I'm changing their diet. Let's try this and that. It ends up being that they had freshener, and that's what gave the dog allergy.
I literally just had this conversation with my dad. That pet fresh stuff that you sprinkle in your carpet, don't use that. That's terrible for your dog.
Mhm.
It's fine. They're fine. And then everyone is sneezing. And I'm just like, oh my God.
That's things that you don't even consider. Also, dish soap. You're washing, when we're talking about the enrichment, right? The bowls, and some places are really hard to get into.
Always rinse everything and then dry it again after it comes out of the dishwasher because
Yeah.
I want to make sure that all the soap is off of it. I'm kind of neurotic though, so
I do the same thing.
I did an allergy panel on Fitz earlier in 24 because he had an allergic reaction. And I did not know what it was that he's reacting to. We've been in this house for 2 years. And ever since we moved into this house, he's been having a specific allergy problem at a specific time of the year. Beginning of fall, end of spring, we're having this thing. So finally, we've got it figured out. We did the blood testing and I got him on the Cytopoint injection, which was so good. It helped him so much because I tried everything for him. And paws were red. His face was red. He was scratching his ears, scratched his face so hard he was bleeding. I was like, okay, this has to stop. So we got him on the Cytopoint injection. Works wonders. The blood panel comes back. He's allergic to so many ridiculous things. Pine trees, cedar trees. Let me tell you guys, I live in a city named Cedar Rapids. Do you think we have cedar trees? We have so many cedar trees. So here's the messed up part. That day that he got really, really bad and inflamed, had spent the entire afternoon dusting and cleaning and vacuuming. And then I put my essential oils in. Now I get pure essential oils. There's no chemicals. Thought everything would be fine. My dumb ass, because I didn't know, used cedar oil.
Yeah.
And caused my dog to have an allergic reaction. Guess where that cedar oil went? In the trash. It's gone. But he was already struggling because the trees are dying or blooming and he's having the reaction because of all the cedar trees. And then I added it into the house, which was probably the only area that he was getting some relief and made it even worse for him. Yeah. And now I just know at the end of February, we get the Cytopoint injection. It lasts for like 6 months. We might have to get another one just in case at the beginning of September, and then he'll be fine. It's just one of those things I didn't know. And I think that there's a lot of that, right? That guilt, that, oh my gosh, I just made this so awful for my dog. But really, it's not that we made a mistake. It's just that we didn't know. And that's, again, where you have to do your research, investigate, get curious, get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
And that's why we have podcast episodes like this where we're really having this random conversation about all these things. But I learned things today. That's the goal, right? Is always to be learning something. I was on the fence about the garlic. So let's go back to it for just a second because I would like to know the appropriate amount and the type. I can't just go to the grocery store and buy that jar of minced garlic.
No, you cannot. Garlic has an enzyme in it. In order for it to be accepted by your dog, it's better to do it freshly. So freshly mince it or smash it. Your dog is going to absorb it. Otherwise, it becomes rancid. It's not rancid. It's
the oils.
Yeah, it's not rancid. It's another word, but it goes bad to the point that your dog's just not going to accept it. It depends on the size of your dog. I wouldn't really do more than once a week.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. I want to do another episode with you, hopefully in person. We can do a live episode in person. And I want to create 3 or 4 different raw meals with you and show people this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And then you could be teaching me why we're doing it this way and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be really really fun and really educational.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's a lot of information in regards to raw and different ideologies. I go by an ancestral diet. I use every type of organ. So there's two different organs. There's muscle organs and then there's secreting organs. And then depending on the organ, it gives your dog an extra benefit. It's super fascinating to get into it and learn what each organ does and the benefits and how it can be incorporated for your dog.
When the podcast goes on the road, you can be one of my first stops and we can just make raw meals for our dogs together, and that will be super fun. Is there anything you would like to leave the listeners with today?
For me, the most important thing as a dog guardian is to blank the dog in front of you. So you're training the dog in front of you. You are enriching the dog in front of you. You are feeding the dog in front of you. Whatever you want to add to that blank, do it.
I love that. Yeah. I absolutely love that because they are unique individuals. And every time you look at their needs and try to meet their needs, you have to look at them as an individual. I think that's so important. Now, thank you so much for being here today. I think this was incredible, and I cannot wait to have you come back and do some cooking. But behind the scenes, we're going to have another conversation about dehydrators. We will share that with you guys. I promise we will share that with you guys. But thank you for listening to this episode of Straight Up Dog Talk, and we will see you guys next week. Straight Up Dog Talk was created by Emily Breslin. It is edited and produced under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk, LLC, and Emily Breslin. If you're enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe and be sure you don't miss an episode. And leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister show, Unpacked, with Jerry Sheriff and Madison Simpson. Thanks for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next week.